This children's movie makes very deep criticisms. It shows us what happens in a deregulated system, where the goal of making money sweeps away everything in its path, even the collective welfare. A system where there are no real limits to that goal, and where everything, however questionable it may be, is done within the law, as it's still happening today, in more cases than we'd like to admit. In Rivertown, robot life unfolds normally until, suddenly, Herb Copperbottom bursts out of the restaurant where he works, ecstatic. He's going to be a dad. He runs home, thrilled. But his wife Lydia tells him she already delivered the baby. It doesn't matter. In the robot world, that means the fun part is about to begin. Building it. They open the Build-A-Baby box and scatter all the pieces across the floor. Herb, without paying much attention to the instructions, starts putting his son together. After a few hours, many parts, and several stumbles, Rodney Copperbottom is born. Herb looks at him with pride, convinced his son will do great things. Of course, he makes the usual first-time dad mistakes, but everything is easily fixed. Rodney grows up, learns to walk using training wheels, and later receives his first big kid parts, handed down from his cousin. Father and son share special moments together, like watching the robot parade, where Rodney spots his idol, Bigweld, the famous inventor. Herb speaks of him with admiration, and Rodney dreams of meeting him. When he asks his father what he does for a living, Herb tells him he's a dishwasher at a large restaurant. At home, Rodney watches the Bigweld TV show with excitement. The inventor says it doesn't matter what you're made of, new, used, or spare parts, everyone can shine. He also teaches that you must look for a need and think of ideas to solve it. Inspired by these words, Rodney starts building his own robot, the Wonderbot, although his first attempts are a disaster. As Rodney enters adolescence, he receives new hand-me-down parts, this time from his cousin Veronica. He feels a bit embarrassed, especially when he appears in his yearbook wearing girls' clothes. Even so, with effort and dedication, he manages to graduate. Now as an adult, he works with his father at the restaurant. Seeing how worn out his dad is, Rodney decides to help and activates Wonderbot, which cleans dishes incredibly well. For a moment, he becomes the hero of the kitchen, until the grumpy boss, Mr. Gunk, shows up. Startled, Wonderbot causes a mess. The boss explodes in anger, humiliates Rodney, and fires him, saying he'll never be more than a dishwasher's son. But Rodney doesn't give up. That same night, he packs his things and heads to the train station. His parents catch up to him. Lydia tries to convince him to stay, but he explains that he's going to Robot City to find a job, help his father, and prove he can be a great inventor. He wants to meet Bigweld and become somebody. Herb, moved, gives him his full support. He tells Rodney that when he was young, he wanted to be a musician, but gave up on that dream out of fear he wouldn't be able to make a living. He urges his son not to make the same mistake. With that hope, Rodney boards the train to Robot City. Upon arrival, everything is new, chaotic, and astonishing. He meets Crank, a highly eccentric robot photographer who takes pictures without film. Together, they accidentally hop onto a wild transportation system that whisks them through a mechanical roller coaster ride across the city. After a series of wild adventures and jolts, Rodney finally arrives at the gates of Bigweld Industries. But instead of a warm welcome, he's greeted by Tim, the prankster gatekeeper, who, after having a good laugh, tells him they no longer accept inventors. Everything is now controlled by Ratchet, a modern robot who's replaced Mr. Bigweld's values with pure profit. Spare parts are no longer produced because they don't generate revenue, condemning less fortunate robots to abandonment. All the focus is on upgrades, which sell well, and to make robots buy them, they must first be made to feel inadequate. That's why Ratchet launches a new slogan: why be you when you can be new? At its core, this children's film delivers some rather powerful critiques. From the outset, there's a clear critique of an economic system that promotes unrestrained profit maximization without oversight or regulation. Ratchet isn't doing anything illegal. He's simply following the principles found in many traditional business manuals. Maximize profits. And how does he do that? By eliminating the production of replacement parts for older robots and forcing everyone to buy expensive, superficial upgrades. Not because robots need them to live better or to survive, which would be a real need, but simply because they look better. And of course, if you don't upgrade or can't afford to, you become obsolete. You're condemned to be discarded or excluded. Now, let's think about this for just a moment. Doesn't that sound remarkably similar to how much of our current economy functions? Instead of addressing real needs, the system focuses on creating new insecurities and then selling us the solutions. It programs obsolescence instead of encouraging longevity or repair, because all of that fuels consumption. And the more consumption there is, the greater the profits. Real needs and people's well-being are pushed into the background. Just take a moment to observe how many industries operate today. First, they make you feel inadequate, too old, too fat, too ugly, poor, or out of style. Then, they offer you a product to fix yourself. Isn't it curious that advertising images always show us unattainable ideals? Flawless skin, standard bodies, material success, happiness, all packaged, edited, and placed before our eyes to plant the subtle seed of, "You're not enough." Ratchet's slogan could easily pass for a real ad campaign. Why be you when you can be new? That message essentially says, who you are is not good enough. And of course, if they first succeed in making you feel insufficient, then they can present themselves as your salvation. Don't worry. Here's this miracle serum, this diet, this new phone, these designer clothes, this upgrade that'll make you who you really meant to be. The problem isn't offering products that improve your life. The problem is first creating an artificial emotional void, only to capitalize on it. That's how the cycle works. A need that didn't exist is manufactured and then turned into a business opportunity. And that cycle, which seems invisible because we're so used to it, is one of the most effective engines of the modern economy. That's why there's always a new update, a new model, a new trend, a new reason to feel like you're still not enough. As if every time you reach something, the bar moves a little further away. All this said, perhaps the film is suggesting that the real problem isn't just Ratchet, but a runaway economic system. Although, I'll come back to that later. Just a quick pause to say that if you're enjoying this video and haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. It would mean a lot and really helps me keep making more videos and content like this. Alright, let's get back to the story. Rodney enters the main hall thinking he'll get to show his invention, but he's only met with ridicule. Ratchet throws the Wonderbot out the window and has Rodney removed by a giant magnetic crane. Still covered in metal particles, Rodney walks aimlessly as random objects stick to him. An oxygen tank latches onto his back, and he ends up tumbling into a garbage bin that rolls him into a dark alley. Underground, mechanical sweepers haul parts to the Chop Shop, a sinister factory where everything is reduced to scrap. It's run by Ratchet's mother, Madame Gasket, a cold and ruthless robot. Ratchet arrives and tells her he's eliminated spare parts. Gasket is pleased, but warns him, if Bigweld comes back, the robots will follow him. When his mother compares him to his father, left hanging like an old rag, he agrees that it's time to take control of the company. He says goodbye with pride, while his father, still chained up, wishes him luck with his evil plans. While Ratchet and his mother conspire, Rodney wakes up inside a dumpster just as Crank tries to take one of his feet. Rodney startles him, and after a chase through the barrels, he recovers his foot, though Crank ends up losing his head, literally. That's when Crank's friends arrive, Diesel and Lugnut, known as the Rusties, who at first eye Rodney with suspicion. Also appearing is Piper, Crank's younger sister, who has rescued Wonderbot and returns him to Rodney. They all head to the shop of Jack, the parts supplier, to fix Crank. But Jack has bad news. There are no more parts, only expensive upgrades. Crank is disheartened until Rodney offers to repair him himself. With a few spare parts, he manages to fix Crank's neck. Everyone is amazed. However, the threat of the sweepers forces them to hide at the home of the enormous and kind Aunt Fanny. There, they find a warm refuge, although also full of comical situations, like their host's inevitable flatulence. That night, Rodney confides in Crank that he's afraid of disappointing his dad. He also tells him that he considers him a friend. They end up laughing together while making armpit noises, until Aunt Fanny lets out a fart so powerful it shakes the house. Rodney wants to find out what happened to Bigweld. As he steps outside, he finds a large crowd gathered in front of Jack's shop. Robots of all kinds are demanding parts, but all that's available are outrageously expensive upgrades no one can afford. Rodney remembers that to help others, he needs to use his talent as an inventor. He picks up his tools and promises to repair every robot that needs it. One by one, he brings life back to broken arms, out-of-tune voices, and rusted parts. Rodney earns the respect and admiration of all. Here I want to revisit something I briefly mentioned earlier, but which deserves deeper attention. If we look closely, we realize that, in truth, Ratchet and Madame Gasket aren't doing anything illegal. Phasing out old parts and selling only expensive upgrades isn't a crime. Now, of course, what is legal and what is moral are two different things. Just because something is legal doesn't automatically make it right. The aggressive sale of upgrades, while clearly immoral in the context we see, is still perfectly legal within the framework of the film's world. But doesn't this also often happen in our own world? Companies that pollute the environment, manipulate consumers, exploit workers, and many times they're not breaking any laws. They do it all with the proper paperwork. It's permitted and even incentivized. That's why, returning to what I suggested earlier, Ratchet and Madame Gasket are not the real problem. They're merely symptoms of something much larger. A system that imposes no limits on corporate power or the pursuit of profit. A system that ends up permitting and even normalizing abuse when it's good business. The true villain isn't Ratchet or Madame Gasket, it's the lack of restraint. It's a deregulated system where strategies that prioritize profit over well-being are rewarded, with no mechanism or balance to limit them or bring both goals into harmony. And let's be clear, this is not an anti-business or anti-profit critique. Don't get me wrong, it's not about claiming that the market or companies are bad in and of themselves. What I'm saying is that when the sole objective is just to make money, with no clear rules, no social responsibility, no thought for the impact being created, then we have a serious problem. Because without clear and fair rules, the market, like any other powerful force, tends to concentrate power, exclude the disadvantaged, and perpetuate inequality. When you let a system driven solely by profit run unchecked, without regulation, without even a minimum sense of responsibility, you run the risk of it consuming everything. Madame Gasket discovers that someone is repairing the outmoded and orders him eliminated. Meanwhile, Rodney receives a letter from his mother with bad news. His father is severely worn down, and without new parts, he doesn't have much time left. With no other options, Rodney decides their only hope is to find Mr. Bigweld. Wonderbot provides a clue. The inventor will be attending the Bigweld ball. Dressed in disguises and visibly nervous, Rodney and Crank manage to sneak into the luxurious event. Crank, playing up his role, pretends to be the assistant of a foreign nobleman to fool the doorman. But inside, Ratchet announces that Bigweld will not be attending. Outraged, Rodney interrupts the event and publicly accuses Ratchet. Security moves to detain him, but Cappy, a high-ranking executive at Bigweld Industries, steps in just in time and saves him. Rodney manages to convince her to take him to see the real Bigweld. Alone in the street, Crank begins to sing with happiness, until suddenly, a sweeper appears behind him, grabs him, and throws him into the chop shop. Meanwhile, Rodney and Cappy arrive at Bigweld's house. Everything looks abandoned. The house creaks with every step until they find Bigweld's original workshop, just like the one on the television show they used to watch as kids, filled with blueprints, half-finished inventions, and dominoes. Rodney blows on one of the dominoes, triggering a massive chain reaction that ends with the formation of Bigweld's figure. Bigweld himself appears, surfing on a giant domino piece, but he's no longer the inspiring robot Rodney had hoped to find. He tells Rodney to give up, that the world has changed. Everything ended when the company stopped prioritizing helping others and started focusing only on money. He tells Rodney that Ratchet defeated him and will defeat Rodney too, that he should just go home and find another useless dream. Disappointed but resolute, Rodney replies that all he ever wanted was to be like him. He and Cappy leave. Inside the chop shop, Crank overhears Ratchet and Madame Gasket talking about their plan to eliminate all the old robots. Terrified, he escapes, though with a female body by accident, determined to warn his friends. Back at the station, Rodney calls home. He tells his father that Bigweld isn't who he thought he was, and that he feels like he's let them down. But Herb reminds him that he could never disappoint him, and that the dreams we abandon become a burden we carry for the rest of our lives. Rodney hangs up just as the Rusties arrive, followed by Crank, who shares what he discovered. Ratchet is capturing outdated robots and taking them to the chop shop to be destroyed. Everyone is ready to give up, until Rodney stops them. He tells them it was a mistake to wait for Bigweld. They have to make it happen themselves. And just then, Bigweld appears. Inspired by Rodney's courage, he decides to join them. "I want to grow up to be like you," he says. The group, now reinforced by none other than Bigweld himself, heads to Bigweld Industries. There, before stunned employees and an unprepared Ratchet, Bigweld takes back control of his company and fires Ratchet. He responds by attacking Bigweld, leaving him damaged and ordering that he be sent to the chop shop. But Rodney arrives just in time. With Wonderbot's help, he rescues Bigweld, sparking a chaotic chase through the city as he tries to repair him. After several leaps, crashes, and chases, they arrive at the chop shop. Crank thinks all is lost, but Rodney encourages them. This is their moment to shine. He tosses the discarded parts, and everyone upgrades themselves for battle. An all-terrain machine, a Valkyrie, Diesel a cowboy, and Lugnut a wrestler. The group storms the facility to confront Madame Gasket, who summons her many henchmen. Piper arrives leading an army of outdated robots, and the great battle begins. Wonderbot manages to knock Madame Gasket off balance, leaving her hanging in the air. Rodney and Bigweld, using a massive saw blade, destroy the sweepers. Ratchet is flung into the air and ends up hanging from Madame Gasket. In trying to save himself, he loosens the ropes and sends his mother straight into the smelter. He's reduced to a plain, powerless robot, left dangling beside his father. The workers rejoice, the outdated robots are freed, and Rodney is hailed as a hero. But one important thing still remains. Back in Rivet Town, Herb is still washing dishes when Lydia calls him. When his boss tries to stop him, Herb, fed up, yanks off the dishwasher stuck to his chest, slams it onto his boss's head, and walks out. Outside, the whole town is waiting, along with his son. Rodney hugs him and introduces him to Bigweld, who has brought boxes of parts to help. Bigweld announces that Rodney will be his personal assistant and future successor. Rodney tells his father that although he couldn't give him much as a child, he gave him the most valuable thing of all, his belief in him. Now he wants to fulfill his father's dream. He gives him back a saxophone. The city celebrates victory. In the end, Bigweld is back. Ratchet and his mother have been defeated, and everyone rejoices. It seems like a happy ending, but not so fast. Did the underlying problem really get solved? Let's think for a moment. How did Ratchet manage to take control in the first place? Bigweld was the leader, yes, but at some point, the board of directors decided it was more profitable to push him aside and replace him with someone who promised to maximize profits. And from a legal standpoint, there was no restriction on Ratchet's motives or plans. Everything was legal. When the film ends, what really changes in that system? Yes, Bigweld is back, and Rodney is his successor, but in essence, the business model and the overall system remains the same. Bigweld may be a good guy, full of good intentions, but what happens when another Ratchet comes along? When a new board of executives once again decides it's more profitable to betray those values? There's no structural safeguard to prevent the same thing from happening again. And it's a fallacy to believe that replacing a bad person with a good one solves the problem when the real issue is the system that allows, encourages, and perpetuates abuses. In fact, this blind faith in virtuous leaders as a magical solution is something we see constantly in the real world. It's very tempting to think everything would be better if we just had the right person in charge. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that leaders don't matter. Of course they do. But if the rules of the game continue to reward selfishness, greed, and lack of social responsibility, another Ratchet will rise. That's why, painful as it may be to accept, a lone hero is not enough to change a system. Rodney does something valuable, yes, but his action, while symbolically powerful, is limited. Depending solely on individual heroism is a fragile solution, because the problem is systematic. And so, to truly change systems, we need clear rules and mechanisms that place limits on abuse. In the film, we don't see that happen. We simply put a good person back in power, until further notice. The problem is not always the person on the throne. Sometimes, the problem is the throne itself. And if we don't change the structures that allow abuse, abuse will always find its way back. So far, we've discussed many deep and serious issues, but I don't want to end this analysis on a bitter note, because despite everything, the film also leaves us with a ray of hope. And not a naive kind of hope, the kind that waits passively for everything to fix itself, but a hope rooted in collective action. It wasn't a single hero who changed things. It was a team. The whole town, the Rusties, the outcasts, the old and obsolete robots. Each one contributed what they had, however they could. They all rose together to stop the plans of Ratchet and Madame Gasket. So, beyond everything we've discussed, we can also take this idea with us, a reminder of the power we hold when we come together. A reminder that nothing, not even an unjust system, is invincible when people rise together. Changing the world doesn't depend on waiting for a Bigweld to come rescue us. It depends on what we're willing to build together. Thanks for staying until the end of the video. Don't forget to subscribe and share it with a friend who you think might enjoy it. And you and I'll see you in the next one.